Hey everybody, welcome to the show. And today I get to interview a sage, a person who is like family, who's meant so much to my family, specifically my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and my wife, Steve Woodworth. Steve is the executive chairman of Masterworks. And there's one thing he wants you to know about him, but I'll tell you in a second. First, Steve, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Johnny. Glad to be here.
So the one thing you want people to know about you, I love this question. The first thing you would want people to know about you is that if we look back on the story of your life, God has led you, and that you have learned to become reliant upon Him, and that's the most precious lesson of your life. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Johnny. I mean, even the detours. I'll tell you one quick story, and we can talk more about it if you want to. But I'm my wife and I came to faith in Jesus at the last year of college, and we decided we wanted to be missionaries. We looked around. We decided to go to Fuller Seminary in California. So we were living in Seattle. We moved down to California to go to Fuller. After one semester, I realized we can't make enough money to live here and pay the tuition, and yet Fuller would float us so we could be in debt, at the end. But how are we going to go to the mission field if we're $20,000 in debt, which doesn't sound like a lot of money now, but in 1980, that was a lot of money.
Yep.
Um, and and so we floundered. I didn't know what to do. We didn't have the money to move back to Seattle. And our pastor told us about an organization called World Vision that was right down the road from Fuller Seminary. I'd never heard of them before. He said it's a big organization and they might be able to use somebody with a business degree. So I walked in the front door and filled out an application without any idea what jobs might be available or anything. I didn't know anybody there. And a couple months later, I got hired. And a few years later, I ended up in charge of all the marketing for World Vision in the United States. And, big team of people and a lot of money I was responsible for. Only God could do that. I mean, even the president at the time who offered me the job said, nobody rises up from an entry level position at an organization to be the VP of marketing without switching organizations along the way to get promoted.
Yeah.
And so he said it's twice as hard to do what you did, and that's just God. I feel like God led me there, and the detour of going to Fuller was worthwhile, but it was really about getting me to Southern California and setting me up to get me to World Vision.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's amazing. And so so going back to, you've learned to trust that. You've learned to trust that meandering pathway that the Lord has for you.
Yeah, that was an actual crisis of faith. Like we were relatively new Christians. Why did God send us here when we can't afford it? We thought we were being obedient. We want to go to the mission field. Not very many people that aspire to do that. And now we've got nothing, and we're just stuck here. But God had a plan, and now I've learned that when I get stuck, the God has a plan, and usually it makes me very uncomfortable before He moves me into the next thing, and so I try to trust Him. I don't do a great job of it all the time, but I try to trust Him that He's got His hand on my life, and the things that I've been able to do have been far beyond what I can explain just because of my natural gifts and abilities and wisdom.
Yep. Yeah, that's amazing. And it reminds me, like when we look at the story of Joseph, right?
Yeah,
It just keeps coming up, like terrible things happen and it keeps coming up roses, right?
yeah.
It takes a while, and there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of pain, but God just consistently shows up and meets this man, and the next thing you know, right, he's a slave, and he's he's gone through the worst trauma, right, of his parents, his family selling him into slavery, and now he's second to the Pharaoh, right? And Pharaoh, I love that picture. Like they're leading him through the streets of Egypt, and they're saying, bow down to this dude.
Yeah. That's a
you
great
know,
example. I haven't
yeah,
fallen as far or gone as
yeah,
high, but
yeah, yeah.
I can relate to that. Yeah, God's sovereignty over everything.
And his blessing. And he also forms a vessel. So part of this is I want to understand, what did those people see in you, right? Because first we acknowledge that it was the Lord. It was not Steve, it was the Lord. But also, that same God created Steve as a vessel of his delight, right? He created you a certain way. So what did those managers, those bosses that brought you up from, like, you walk in the door and you're nobody, nobody knows you, and now you're the VP, overseeing, I think you said 250 people. What what did they see?
Well, that's interesting too. I was a math whiz as a kid, and scored very high on any kind of generalized math aptitude thing throughout my junior high and high school, and college. I finished calculus in I finished college level calculus in high school, and got advanced placement at the University of Washington. Got credit for those classes by testing into it. And by the time I got to World Vision, they had a mainframe computer, which you probably don't even know what that is.
I've heard the name. I've never seen
It,
one.
it was like, today it'd be as powerful as your laptop, but it filled an entire room and had to have air conditioning underneath it and everything. I mean,
Wow.
it filled a room the size of a warehouse, is what I mean. And it had a treasure trove of data. They kept data on all their donations and their donors, and they kept data on their television programs that they aired and how much they spent and how much they got. And they just had all this data there, and nobody had really done much. There were reports coming out of the computer, but nobody had really dove in to see what kind of strategic
Yep.
questions we could ask of it.
Yep.
And I had a boss who was really ingenious, and he would come up with ideas and say, "Why don't you look at this?" And one of the big breakthroughs early on in my career, he said, "Why don't you analyze how often can we show a TV show in a given market?" And the traditional wisdom was based on the Jerry Lewis telethon, which you probably haven't seen that either. It used to be always every Labor Day, and it was a once a year thing. And World Vision got into TV and thought they weren't doing a holiday thing or anything like that. They were buying an hour slot and airing a program that they had pre-recorded, and it was working like crazy. But they had a mental model that we can only do it once a year, and then we will have gotten everybody in Cincinnati, or we will have gotten everybody in Chicago. And so occasionally the stations would offer extra hours here and there and maybe give a better price, and World Vision would go ahead and buy it and air extra programs. So they had all that data. And I went in and did a correlation analysis on the length of time since the previous airing and the response to the current airing, and found zero correlation. So then that was very intriguing. Like, maybe we can air more than once a year. And so we actually started buying programs much closer together. We even went so far as to buy like 13 weeks in a row, same time slot, and
Yeah.
we saw no deterioration in results. And so that was a huge breakthrough, because that was World Vision's largest source of new donors, and it was the largest breakthrough in a long time. We doubled the TV budget from that one study that I did. They doubled the TV budget,
Oh
and it was a
man.
big inflection point for World Vision. Well, that had me meeting with the most senior people at World Vision presenting this analysis, and I had those opportunities because of the analytics that I was able to do. They were like literally like presidential level conversations about strategy based on what the numbers were saying. And that's how I started to get attention. And then I got responsibility for some of the income programs as I started to feel a little bit bored with just doing analysis. I wanted some hands-on responsibility, and they gave it to me. And then that worked well. And all of it was very data driven, which at a time when nobody was doing that in the nonprofit world except World Vision.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that a theme with you? The data-driven kind of
Yeah.
analysis?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have my own company for the last
Yep.
more than 30 years, doing helping Christian nonprofits with fundraising and marketing, and that has been at our core DNA for the whole 30 plus years that I've been here. Because that I learned at World Vision,
Yeah.
as well as testing and trying things and trying to do things at the lowest possible cost, see if they'll work, and then if it looks like it works, spend a little more money, and if it's still working, then go all in. World Vision was very oriented at testing with a really smart, low spend kind of mentality, and we just kept having one breakthrough after another. And I got the chance to lead that. So that again fit right just with the math aptitude. which I don't use that much anymore. I got people that do that work, but I understand the importance of it because I did it.
Yeah. So, so was it bigger than the math aptitude? Was the math aptitude the ability to crunch numbers? But there's something above on top of that, isn't there? Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was a culture at World Vision of innovation, just constantly trying new things, and and aspiring to raise more money because kids are dying. I mean, what greater motivation could you have than that? And we did all the work in Jesus' name, and so the kind of mentality was bigger, better, faster, cheaper. Just let's keep trying stuff and let's take this as far as we can, as fast as we can. Double digit growth every year, and trying new things. And I was my strength finders, the Gallup strength
Yep.
finders. My number
Yeah.
one is learner. So I just love that learning, and I just naturally was very excited to keep learning new things and trying new things. And we went into multiple channels. We weren't raising money in Christian radio at the time, but we tried it and it worked. And so then we went big on that. And so that was happening under my management because I was highly motivated. I just fit the culture. I didn't create
Yeah.
the culture. It was
Yeah.
already there when I got there.
Yeah.
In fact, I've spent multiple times talking to the guys who were the leaders back in those days. How did you create this culture?
Yeah.
Because I've still never been able to replicate it. I've never seen anything quite like it in a nonprofit.
Yeah. And what was it? What was it about it that was special?
Well, the one guy who I think is most responsible for creating the culture was the executive vice president at the time, a guy by the name of Bill Cleaver. And then we had a advertising agency that was a great agency led by the president, who was named Keith Jesperson. They're both retired now, but Bill said I was always looking for people who were what he called next level leaders.
Yeah.
And what he meant by that is that you're constantly thinking about, how do I take this thing to the next level? And he said you're not content to just tweak and make it a little bit better. You're always looking, what's the next breakthrough? And based on what we learned here, what should we try next? And even if something doesn't work, okay, what did we learn and why didn't it work? And how can that better inform us on what we're going to continue to do? And by the time I was VP of marketing, we had 100 tests going at any given time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in all different phases from an initial design to rolling out winter. We had 100 things in process, and all you have to do is make little percentage here and a percentage there, and have most of them work, and you're in a major growth mode. And that's what we were throughout those years.
Yeah, that's huge. Something I hear you say, or I heard you say a little back that I want to circle, is this pattern, and the pattern that I see is try something, and if it works based on the data, that's interesting. Like try something and then look at the data. If it works, then go big on that thing,
Right.
right? And has that been kind of the model for you that you learned at World Visions?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. I used to call it toe in the water testing.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you a quick example. We found out that there were Spanish language cable television stations back when cable was relatively new, and we were big into TV by then, but we hadn't done anything in Spanish. So we thought, I wonder if it would work in Spanish. So we thought, how little can we spend to find out if it works? And we ended up hiring some Hispanic actors to dub over in Spanish our television show, which is schlocky, but they were doing that with regular programming from the networks at the time too, so the audience was used to it. And and we did just a very minimal number of airings to see what kind of response we got, and we were getting double, triple the kind of response we would get on English language TV. So then we went a little bit bigger, did some more spend. It still worked. The results held up. Then we got some Spanish speaking celebrities to do a whole program for us just designed for that market. And we went from zero to $40 million a year in 3 years.
Oh my,
Yeah.
that's crazy talk. Wow. That's so cool,
With
man.
very little risk because we didn't
Yeah,
spend
yeah.
very much to start with.
Yes. Yeah. So I love that question. For some reason, it reminds me. Are you familiar with Greg McKeown, who wrote Essentialism, the book
No.
Essentialism? And he wrote another book called Effortless. And the premise of the book is of Effortless is what's the question is, how could this be easy? Right? So you're supposed to look at a complex problem and then say, okay, how could this be easy? Right? Because we have a predisposition to come to a complex problem thinking it's going to be hard to solve. And so it trains you to come into situations. Just asking that question changes the result that you get. Right? And what I keep hearing you saying is, what's the lowest cost way that we could test this? Like, that's the right question,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's a great question because then it causes the creativity to start to fire up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an amazing outcome. Now, does that gift work the opposite way? So if you dip your toe in the water and the data says it doesn't work, are you like a relentless, like, nope, we're done, or,
Not
you know,
necessarily. We were not happy for many years with the percentage of people who gave a gift when they said they would sponsor a child. Back in those days, we didn't have online, so people had to call in and say, "Yeah, I'll sponsor a child, and here's my name and address." And and also credit cards were kind of people were reluctant to give out their credit card number, so that didn't really work. So we had to trust them. Okay, we'll send you a child that you can sponsor. We had little less than 60% of the people actually sent a gift, and we thought that 40% represents people who said they would sponsor a child and then they didn't ever follow through. We got to be able to crack the code on that. So we tried multiple things in that window that did not work, and we just kept trying. We kept hammering away at it for a while. We tried a magazine that introduced you to World Vision that was not dated, that would work for anybody that came on over the course of that year. We tried a thank you letter from a celebrity, and we found that worked, but only at a certain time. It didn't work if you sent it too soon. And we finally came up with a whole mental model that if we send people things that they're not expecting too soon, it actually decreases their likelihood to follow through on their child sponsorship. Probably because they're thinking, I just wanted to sponsor a child and now they're inundating
yeah,
me with mail.
yeah,
And so we stayed away then from that first like 30 days or so, not doing anything. We even found that a thank you call in the first 30 days saying, thank you for saying you sponsor a child. Do you have any questions? It decreased the fulfillment. It decreased the rate of people
crazy,
that actually gave. So then
crazy.
we knew that we have to leave people alone for at least 30 days and not send them anything they're not expecting. So even failures can lead to learnings that help design your program for you and make it better.
Well, yeah, I can see that. I see this emphasis on the data, which I think probably has, as far as I can tell, has a lot to do with the way that these initiatives have been successful. Because I do hear that. I hear that really, like, you don't wander too far away from what the data tells you, and even if it's not telling you what you want to hear, it's like you're going to use that for your advantage and just make different decisions based on the data, which might sound dead simple to people, but it's actually hard to do because you have to have the mechanisms in place to collect the data in a usable format. And even going back to what you said, like, you've got this mainframe computer that's spitting out reports that nobody's reading, right? Like, data needs a storyteller, right? Data needs a steward and a storyteller. Otherwise, it's worthless.
And that's what I was particularly good at early in my career is saying what should we do based on this, and or what should we try based on what this is saying. And I even find today that a lot of people that have a background in analytics and data, they produce reports, but they don't think about, okay, what does it mean, and how do I advise management on what strategic decisions I think should be made based on the data. So I try to get our analysts to think that way, and as they get experience doing that, they become more and more able to connect the data to strategy.
Yeah, because there's a third step. Because I work with data, so I'm the CEO of a tech-enabled research and data company. So this is dear to my heart, actually, unexpectedly. Like what we're talking about is dear to my heart, like in my experience. And it's like, yes, there's the data, and then you can give a report on the data. You can give a report on the data that maybe explains what the data is saying. But even that's not enough. It's got to get to the third step of what do we do? What action do we take or not take based on the story that the data is telling? And very rarely do you see somebody, they have one of the three, but very rarely do people follow it all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
Um,
And most people that are really good with data, they love graphs and charts, and they'll I've seen slide decks that are 70 slides long but never say one thing about what we ought to do. It's just
yep,
all interesting information, and
yep,
that's worthless. That's a waste of time.
yeah. Yeah, and now that goes back to, you took my Superpower Quest survey, so you self-diagnosed as an achiever leader with a core drive of progress. This whole story makes sense in the context of that, right? Like this core drive of progress is like you want motion, you want movement, you want to see results. You don't want to talk forever. Like,
Right.
let's go, let's get it done, right? And then achiever is like, you again, you're going to be very result oriented, a pusher, a mover, a dragger, right? And then the leader is or the galvanizer in the six types of working genius. If you're familiar with that, that kind of correlates. You're going to coach people up, right? You don't mind being a hub of discernment and direction for a group of people so that they can reach their potential.
Yeah. I love it. First of all, I like working through people because we get so much more done. I don't need to be the center of attention. And I like to coach people so they learn to do it without my help so that we can get even more done. And I really like developing people and seeing them blossom in their gifts as well. So all that kind of comes together. And my current company is about 130 people who help Christian organizations with their fundraising and marketing and volunteer recruitment and things like that. And so all those clients want to get results. And so we have to be pushing hard for achievement all the time.
Yep, yep, yeah. This is it's very fun to get to unpack this with you. So I think we've got a good sense at this point. I've got a really good sense of kind of your design, like the way that God's designed you, the disposition that He's given you, the drives that He's given you, and then how those are played out, somewhat across your career. Now, let's talk about your calling, right? So now we add, because we talk about, I always say calling is kind of the intersection between your design, your identity, your truest, deepest identity, and your experience. And I think those things all inform a sense of calling. Like, what am I here to really accomplish in the world? What would you say that calling is for you?
So my particular calling has been toward Christian parachurch ministries, making them better, helping them flourish, helping them grow. So it's across all different kinds of ministry, from reaching unreached people who've never heard the name of Jesus to helping the poor and needy. We serve a lot of the largest homeless missions in the country, Christian homeless missions. And so in a sense, my calling is the ministry of my clients in terms of the impact on the world. But I'm kind of like the high ridge general that's not out on the field, but is back looking out over the field and helping direct things so that they get their work done better, and they can grow and have more impact. And yeah, I'm past normal retirement age, but I have no desire to retire because I feel like God put me on this earth to do this kind of thing. And what am I going to do if I stop? I don't have the energy I had 20 years ago, but I still have enough energy that I don't want to sit on the couch, and I don't like golf, and I don't have any desire to just have a leisurely, lifelong vacation for the rest of my life. I don't think that's why God put me on earth and why I'm still here. I think
Yes.
I'm still here to make a difference. And I'm working very much on my legacy, being the people that I'm leaving in charge, and how the company's set up to stay focused on the mission that it's been focused on. I've been working a lot on that for the last 10 years, but especially the last 5 years, I've groomed my successor. We just named him CEO, and I've stepped into executive chairman. And so I feel like that's a big part of my life right now, is setting up the next generation and facing the fact that I'm mortal. I won't be here forever, and I'm not going to cling to the reins of authority. I'm going to train up other people. And I've got a great guy, Brian Brown, who I spotted, oh gosh, more than 5 years ago as a potential successor. So I had him start reporting directly to me. And he's been phenomenal, and he'll take it beyond where I ever could have. And that's exactly what I dreamed of, that I would leave that when I'm
Yep.
done.
Yeah. So, and now I'm hearing your passion for succession because
Yeah.
I see you talk a lot about this topic of healthy succession. So often what we see is that it's unhealthy, right? The new leader maybe steps on the toes of the old leader, or there's just not a there's not a sense of mutual respect or a sweet savor or sweet smell that comes when the whole thing's done. So is this part of the reason, because you're going through it? Is that part of the reason that you have this passion for succession, or did that come before? You know,
It came even before. I've watched probably between 100 and 200 successions of CEOs of ministries. And Johnny, I came to the conclusion that about half of them go badly. And
wow.
I started to try to figure out why. And a significant portion of the half that go badly are really disasters, like
Yep.
income drops by 50%.
Yep.
In some cases, the ministry goes out of business. And I started to dial into some specific principles as to what I thought were the keys to why some have blown up and why some go really well. And what I've been doing more is like being a student of that and then applying it to my own
Yep.
situation.
Yep.
So it's the fact that I'm in the middle of that in my life stage is probably part of why I've been so fascinated by it, and knowing that knowing that I got to figure it out before I get there. So I've been working on it for a few years and wrote a book that came out in 2024.
Yep. Yep. And what's the name of the book?
The book's called Lost in Transition.
Yeah, brother. And I can see now how that comes back to your calling. If we go back to your calling, it was something like um, helping Christian nonprofits to thrive, right? Like being an asset to help them thrive. And then also we're talking about like you're trying, because you're an achiever, you want to accomplish huge things, but you can accomplish more if you work through others who are in lockstep with you. So you're actually achieving massive outcomes in the world through these nonprofit ministries, through the equipping of them to be thriving, right? I think.
That's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, it starts with achieving things through my own team, and then it reaches out to achieving things through ministries that are, some of them are very large. And then it also, rather than just look at individual succession situations and talk to individual leaders, I wrote a book hoping
Yep.
that I could get that message out much wider and farther than I could ever reach personally, to change the narrative that happens in Christian ministry successions. Because you're right. I mean, one of the things that happens is the younger leader comes in and thinks, well, your time's done, so I don't need you anymore. And they don't realize that the senior leader has all kinds of relational equity that would be of huge value to the organization and to the younger leader. And they don't realize that the wisdom that's there that they could really use and tap
Yep.
into. They
Yep.
feel like it's my day now, your day's past. So in order to prove myself, I've got to do this without you. And
Yes.
they lose a tremendous amount of equity that they could have had. And the ones that have gone really well, there's years of overlap. Like I've been in this process with my successor Brian for 5 years, and we become really good friends deliberately. I mean, that was our
Yeah.
goal from the beginning, and that's what we've worked hard at. It hasn't always been easy because it isn't awkward, and it's a very emotionally charged situation for both, for the incoming leader who is wondering, can I really do this? And the outgoing leader who's wondering, am I now a dinosaur? Is there anything left for me to do? And nobody wants to be a dinosaur.
No. But I can see how those fears trigger off of each other, right? They totally do, because it's like, okay, I don't know if I can do this. I'm insecure. Then if that incumbent is too overbearing, you crush this person's spirit, right?
Yeah.
And then they get resentful or like, I got to prove myself. And in the other way, if am I a dinosaur? And then they start to get too assertive or too aggressive and make you feel like, man, get out of my way. That gets triggered easy. So I can see how that would be so easy to happen 50% of the time.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. And then it's also true for parachurch ministries that boards don't realize what they don't know. And they don't understand these dynamics, and they also don't really understand enough about the organization to hire the right CEO a lot of times. And they don't involve the staff. They think, well, it's our job as a board to pick the next CEO. And because it's our job, we should know how to do it, or we're not a good board. So we'll go out and do it. And they hire an executive search firm, and they completely ignore the existing staff. And the existing staff and the existing CEO know much more about what the organization needs than the board will ever know. The board may meet 5 days a year, and as one leader told me, they only know what I want them to know.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
only know what I tell them. So, yeah, that's another big theme that I've tried to hammer is that boards need to get help from the outgoing CEO unless the person's been a failure. They need to get their help, and then they need the help of the senior staff as well. And they need
Yep.
to bring them along so that
Yep.
by the time the decision comes down, the senior staff have been a part of it and they're bought into it and they help make it successful.
Yep. So are you, kind of on top of the book then, are you actually actively helping organizations walk through this process and consulting and maybe bringing a process to that? Like, are you doing that or do you have a team that's doing that?
I'm not really doing that. What I've done is I've gotten calls from people that have either read the book or said, I heard you wrote a book, and I'm in a pickle right now. I feel like my board doesn't understand what I'm going through and isn't treating me well. And would you be willing to meet with my board chair? So I've had quite a few of these one-off kind of situations. I'm not ready to build like a consulting practice around that. Maybe that would be a future phase of my life. I'm still very much involved in Masterworks, which is a marketing agency primarily. And so I don't really have time to build a consulting practice around it. And I don't want to get on airplanes more than I already have to. But I am having some really fun and exciting one-off breakthroughs with organizations. I find I can sometimes just talk to a board chair once or twice on Zoom and get everything on track. And or I can talk to a CEO who feels mistreated and tell them, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to say, here's how to address it. I can coach an incoming CEO on how to respect the outgoing CEO and get the maximum value from them while you can. And so I've been doing that, and that's been very gratifying. Every time I get one of those wins, I think that one alone was worth writing the book.
Yes. Yeah, it's huge. So let me ask this question. I'm a person, let's say I'm going through this kind of succession process. I'm experiencing some of the problems that you describe in your book. I've read your book, right? I don't necessarily have access to you, right? Because you're not going to be, you're not going to be able to do this for everybody. Um, where do I go if I need help? Is there any place right now where, what would you recommend to that person that's in that pickle?
Uh, I would recommend that they get a mentor who's been through it, that they find a pastor who's retired or a other ministry leader who's been through it to get coaching, to get like an executive coach kind of person, especially one who has seen good and bad transitions of leadership. I don't know of a individual um, consulting firm that
Yeah,
specializes in this.
yeah,
And executive search firms tend to think, well, hire us and we'll just find the right person. They don't tend to stick around and make sure that it succeeds and coach each of the parties in how to work together. And I think the success rate of internal successions, Johnny, is probably more like 70%.
okay,
And
that's good.
and search firms tend to think we got to go outside or we haven't done our job. Um, so that if there's an internal candidate, I think almost always that internal candidate should get the job because they've already passed the test of getting familiar with the culture, and that's a big part. That's a big problem too. A lot of times leaders are hired who don't fit the culture, like they're too business oriented for a real ministry oriented culture, or vice versa, or things like that. And the internal candidates are already adapted to the culture.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like that would be the way to health, and it sounds like a great way to avoid resent resentment, right? And losing like that person who's a candidate is probably a high contributor. And now you pass them over and bring somebody, what you've said to them is you're not good enough. And now you've got that person, what? Now they're supposed to stay there forever, Like, I think you've basically kind of guaranteed they're probably not going to be there forever. Um, so I've seen that kind of thing happen too. Um, so as we get into like kind of the last phase of the interview, I was going to talk to you a little bit about your dreams and hopes and goals for the future. But before I do that, like I think maybe some of that is already afoot. So can you talk a little bit about what's happened recently with Masterworks and where that fits into your ultimate dream?
Yeah, I've been on a journey for several years, along with working with Brian on being my potential successor. I've been working on how does the ownership, so that's the leadership side of leaving a legacy. The ownership side has been something that I've struggled with because we work with nonprofits. We're not like a super profitable company that can afford to just give everybody, stock options and then pay them enough to be able to buy them and that kind of thing. So my wife and I had decided we were going to give away the company into a Christian nonprofit trust, and we had started down that path. And then the leader of that trust told me, I've been praying about your situation a lot, and I feel like this isn't the best path for you, even though we started and we had given away a chunk of the company. He said, I really believe that you should find a for-profit company with the same DNA, same kind of market focus on Christian causes. And I think I know exactly the company that fits that bill, that will keep it focused on the kingdom. And I know the founder, and he's interested in talking to you. And that company was Gloo,
Yeah.
Gloo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, we just completed this month sale to Gloo, and they're going to keep us focused on the kingdom. Their clientele now is almost all churches. They have some parachurch ministry clients as well. They're more on technology. We're on more on the fundraising and marketing side. They're on the technology side, and it just seems like a perfect match. And I love the people. I've met the founder several times as the senior executives. They all really have a heart for the church, and they're excited to expand their impact for the Lord into parachurch ministries through working with Masterworks. And they're going to let us continue to be who we are. We still exist as an independent company. I still work for Masterworks, not for them. And that's just literally been released today. A press release went out today.
Man,
So I'm excited about it. There's a
congratulations.
lot of potential synergies there.
I'm excited for you. And even going back to the first thing you said, right? The Lord has always led you on this unexpected journey. Hobbit. I just quoted the Hobbit. I wish I could say that was by design, but the Lord has led you on this journey. But it's always been the Lord leading you, right? All along.
I feel like it, I mean, in the moment, a lot of times it feels like, where are you and why am I lost in the woods here? Even this sale to Glue came out of the blue. I was working on giving it away, and then all of a sudden, this leader's telling me, I don't think this is what you should do. And I really agonized over that because I felt like we've already made a decision. We've got a plan. I don't want to go revisit the whole thing again. But I think the Lord just keeps us humble by not showing us the future and letting us be confused and leaving us in the wilderness occasionally. And I try to just trust him. I don't always do that. I don't do it well on a daily basis. I do it pretty well on an annual basis maybe. And I can see back when I look back that, oh, well, this was your plan all along.
Yeah.
Now I get it. There's a graphic I saw that somebody did that says, my plan, and it shows a stick figure and then a flag, and it's just a straight line. And then another one says God's plan, and it shows a stick figure and a flag and all these like dips and lakes
Yeah.
and rivers
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that's really what life's more like.
Yeah. I will say that that's comforting. I'll give you a take on that. That's actually comforting for me, and I think that's probably a comforting for a lot of people that would watch this, to see somebody, right? Like Steve, you're kind of you're a sage at this point. Like you've done this for a long time. You've had a great deal of success, remarkable success that's come from the Lord. And you're also saying, yeah, last week I was in agony. You know, I was confused. I didn't know, I thought this, and then all of a sudden God's bringing this, and it's uncomfortable and it's not fun. I mean, I'm personally in a season where that's pretty uncomfortable, and there are some things that I can't see how it's going to turn out. Um, and I think it's encouraging and comforting to know, yep, that's life.
That's life. Yeah. God doesn't work in straight lines. Your Joseph story is a perfect example of that. He did life does he I don't know why. I guess because we grow and we become more dependent on him. But there's always suffering along the way and struggle and darkness, and that's just part of the way he works.
Yeah. And the dependent part, I think, really does. I mean, we don't get to understand all of why God does what he does, but I do think it has the effect of either it's going to drive me into more dependence on him, or I'm going to say, no, I don't trust you anymore. And I'm going to be, it forces that conclusion, right? It forces that reckoning. Like, will I
Right.
depend more on him
Yeah.
when it makes less sense? It makes me think of when the disciples, when Jesus is like, hey, everybody, and everybody comes and everybody's around Jesus and Jesus is preaching. And then he's like, well, what you got to do is you got to eat my flesh and you got to drink my blood. And the disciples are like, no, like somebody pull him off the stage. You know what I mean? Like, and Jesus is like, no, I mean, I'll say it again. You got to eat my flesh. And the people are like losing their minds. Like, what is this guy even talking about? And everybody's going crazy. And Jesus just doubles down, triples down, like, and then he looks at the after, and then everybody leaves. They're just gone. They're
Everybody
like,
except the apostles.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then there's a 12, and Jesus looks at them and is just like, "You gonna go away too?" You know, and and Peter's like, "Where can we go? You have the words of eternal life." And it's at that point, it's not because there's any rational reason to stay. They saw the same thing everybody saw, right? This man preaching cannibalism,
Yeah.
right? And yet, like Jesus intentionally brings them to that point. Like, will you trust me? Even when your senses completely confound you, will you still trust me? Because you're going to need to. Because the places I'm going to lead you, you're going to need to be able to trust me that way.
Yeah.
You know?
I think you got to preach that to yourself almost every day, Johnny. I mean, there are high points in life where you feel like, okay, now I see what you were doing, God. It all makes sense, and I'm high as a kite. I'm so happy and joyful. But those are very few and far between. Mostly life is lived out daily and choosing to trust the Lord despite the fact that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I receive that, man. I think that's good wisdom for anybody listening. I mean, that's foundational to the walk. If we're going to walk with the Lord, we're going to go through this wandering, squirrely, swirly adventure. That's not always going to feel like an adventure. And, will you go away? You know, it's like,
Word.
no, where else am I going to go? I don't have any place else to go.
Right.
I'm all in here. So if this is wrong, I'm jacked, like, because I'm all in. I don't have any place else to go.
Yeah, and we trust him not because we understand, but or because we're just blind, but because of who he is
Yeah,
and because of
that's
all
right.
of his promises. And so we've got to know the word. We've got to be in the word, feeding ourselves with the promises of God.
Yep, that's right, man. I needed that this morning. This morning, I'm waking up into days where it's like, okay, I need you. If I'm gonna do this day, I need you. I
Yeah.
gotta find you. I gotta find you. And then he speaks the word, right? We get the word. We get the spirit. We get the comfort of the Father, and that's what we need. Um, so I'll ask this question. So now, what is the future? And this is, we're in our last few minutes. What is the dream for you, or what do you see? What do you desire? What do you long for unfolding in the years to come?
Well, it's foggy because of this sale to another company. And my role stepping up to a board chair means less involvement in the day
Yep.
to day, which I've been
Yep.
on that path for a while anyway. I've had a couple of flights recently where Brian and I have sat next to each other and I've talked about, like, what would you like me to stop doing as a board chair that I have been doing as CEO, and he's not even clear on it yet. I said, "You want me to stop attending your executive leadership team meetings?" He said, "No, I think we need your wisdom right now, and there will come a day where you probably don't need to be there, but I need you there right now." And so we're still trying to figure that out. What my dream is that in some way that I don't now see, that I won't have to be putting out energy that I don't have, this has been a season with a lot of extra work to bring this fruition, and that I will somehow find that I can have a lot of impact for Gloo, also for their church side, and and continue to provide value to Masterworks through my network and my mentoring and things like that that I really enjoy, and do less. At this phase of life, I'd like to do less and less of what I don't like to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
already doing less. Brian's taken a lot of that on when there are staff problems and conflicts and things like that. That's very de-energizing to me, and I don't get
Yes.
involved in those anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. But what is that thing then that does light you up that you want to be doing more of? What is that more of the coaching?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
mentoring people,
Yeah.
coaching, and networking, connecting people.
Oh man, this has been really beautiful. So I think we're ready to kind of come to a close. Love spending the time with you today, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great. I appreciate it. Time flew by.
It did. It did. It's a good time, man. It's a good time to just talk about the deep things of life and of God and of business. So thank you, and for everybody that joined us up to this point, we're so grateful that you were able to be with us, and we'll see you next time.